This is Nate Dodson, and you're tuning into And This Is Why, the podcast show. A show where we help you take your business to the next level. New episodes every week streaming on your favorite streaming platforms. Enjoy today's episodes. Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this episode of And This Is Why. Host Nate Dodson. Today we're going to talk about really the front end of raising capital and the things to think about as you are, planning out your business, your opportunity, what to do first. We're talking to really an amazing entrepreneur, Brandon Jenkins. He's been there, raised the capital, got deals done, and is now ready, willing, and about to start sharing that. So Brandon, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nate, man. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and I love your show, man. It's always a pleasure connecting with you, so thanks for having me today.
Definitely. Well, before we kind of get a little bit deeper into the capital planning, set the stage. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what got you to, what you're doing today.
Sure. So in my past life, I was a petroleum engineer. So I worked on rigs. I worked onshore, offshore. You know, if you remember Armageddon, right? The kind of exaggerated version of what I did at the time. Really enjoyed that business.
Thank you, sir, for saving the world.
That's right. It was hard work, hard drilling. And so I did that for some time, and I really enjoyed my career, enjoyed the people I worked with. But I started to notice that, that industry is very reactive to its types of commodity, right? And so if the price adjusts downward, they start to have an immediate reduction in headcount. And so for me, I wanted to have something to offset some of that volatility. And I've always been interested in building wealth. And so I started to look more into real estate as a vehicle to do so, and started to get into single family rentals. I had a small portfolio of about 12 units at the time, and my goal was to scale up.
Were they all single family homes? Because so many people start out that way, or did you dive right into multifamily? Tell me a little bit about when you really got interested in real estate. How'd you do it? So many people are interested, but they don't even know where to start.
That's a good point. And so I did a couple of things. One is I kind of did some research on my own. So back when I first started to look into it, it was actually really when Bigger Pockets podcast first got kicked off. So I think they had like a few episodes going. And so I started to listen to those, started to read a lot of books. Believe it or not, my interest in real estate stemmed from the credit crisis. Because I kind of wanted to figure out what the root causes of it were. And so I started to really get fascinated in the business from there. So I started to really do some of the, foundational work. What does it mean to have a cash flowing assets? What are the 5 big advantages of real estate, which are income, depreciation, equity buildup from debt pay down, appreciation, and then leverage. So I got really kind of trained up, a bit of self-education, I'll call it. Then I reached out to one of my buddies from college. And so he was, at the time, he was flipping homes. So he was flipping single family properties. And I went out to check out his operation, and I was immediately hooked. And so, because we were driving the market, and he was like, yeah, I own that. And I have this project that I'm currently renovating. So I went to check out his projects. And so I just got hooked. But I knew that I wanted stable cash flow. And so what I did was to kind of come up with a plan where, because being an engineer, I had to really get heavy into analysis. So I analyzed kind of the sub-market.
Let's be honest. I literally hate selling engineers on investments because it's not about the sale. It's not about emotions. It's show me the numbers.
Yeah.
So that's must have been a big hurdle for you, getting into real estate. Just it's numbers. It's tough to sell you.
It is tough, man. Even when I have conversations with my colleagues, it's a bit challenging sometimes because I want to see it's you can show them the numbers to say, hey, this is why this works, but oftentimes they'll want to do an exhaustive, kind of a market analysis, a global analysis, and then go from top down. And and one of the reasons why we appreciate real estate is because it is a bit simple. So you come up with your numbers, you make sure you have the right people in place, and then you execute. And for an engineer, that's a bit of a challenge because we're used to running numbers and running models and over again before we make a move. So it is very difficult. For me, the thing that made it real for me was seeing it in action. because I even before I had property number one, I built a ton of spreadsheets up. And so even though I technically didn't need them, I was just exercising my engineering acumen. But
you are the only person I've ever heard of that was doing spreadsheets for fun.
yeah, just for fun. Didn't even need them. So, but going out to see it in the field, like when I really connected with, my buddy from college and said, let me see what you have going on here. He connected me with other people who were investing, and I got to kind of check out some of what they were doing. That's when it really made it tangible for me. And so to answer your question, they were all single family properties, single family rentals. And, I kind of used that whole burst strategy where I made sure that the price point that I acquired it for and that I could upgrade it or renovate it to, and that new value would leave enough capital left over for after I do a cash out refi for me to do it again. So I started off with that strategy, and I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I had a good rhythm going, but it did limit me in terms of economies of scale. And the vacancy risk was also something that was pretty high. If I had 12 units at the time, and so if 2 or 3 of them were vacant, well, I really felt that, And so I wanted to scale up. So I started to look for multifamily deals. Initially, I started to look for them for myself, because again, I had a couple of deals that I looked at and analyzed, and I said, well, if I only had this much additional capital, but if I come up on the price this much, I'll get the deal. But I stuck to my guns and said, I don't want to come up 50K, even though there were deals that were home runs. I knew that I should have just bumped it up, got the deal, improved the asset, and then I would have been in a strong position. But I got it my own way. Okay, so that's the engineer in me. But so after that, though, one of my coworkers introduced me to a capital raiser that was a neighbor of his, and so because he was also a real estate investor, so we started to talk about ways to scale. He introduced me to the capital raiser, and he and I said, "Hey, okay, let's start going to these meetups." So my coworker,
let me ask you this, if you don't mind, because there's so many people that they're thinking about being in real estate or they are in real estate and they're looking to take that, business to the next level. And one of the toughest things is raising capital.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually a huge fan of partnering with and working with guys that have raised capital, have been successful doing that. Like, did you work out like a partnership deal with them or more of a mentorship? Like if somebody else is like, oh, I don't even know how to get started. Like, how did you do it, and what would you recommend?
So I'll tell you that the story that I was kind of going through there is really before I really got on the active side. But I do want to address what you said, though. I believe very strongly in partnering with someone who kind of has the experience level, and I'll tell you why. But before you, most people who are aspiring or budding investors, they say they want to do it all themselves and they want to sort of gradually build their way up. And I understand why that's the thought, but there are a lot of risks that you take on when you do so. It sounds good, but unfortunately there are a lot of holes that are left unplugged and unfilled that could eat your lunch. That could cause you to get into a deal that could really put you in a bind. And so I typically will recommend partnering with someone that has experience, and then learning what you can, making sure you build a relationship. But and contribute too, because you have to have a substantive role in the partnership. But it's still, in my opinion, is to the benefit of someone who is fairly new to partner with someone who has the experience that can show them, hey, here are the things that we look for in a deal. And what I like to tell people is hey, you will compress the time significantly if you say, okay, I'm going to make sure that my network is fully groomed to understand, hey, that this is what I do now, that I'm going to pick up an additional skill. For me, it was underwriting and asset management, but depending on what people's skill sets are, even if you have a profession, you can still roll some of that into kind of the active side of real estate investing, and leverage that skill set to then partner with someone who has experience and then add value to them and to that team. And it just shaves off a ton of years. It saves you potential money because you might get into a deal and miss something. So I just think
mistakes
it makes
are
all the sense in the world. Yeah. So I mean, and so that's kind of how I got started.
All right, I love it. Well, now you've partnered. I know you actually ended up pretty huge in the multifamily space. Did 20 300, 2,000 plus units. Like that's a lot of traction there over the years. How long ago did that really start? And I mean, have you sold off a good chunk of it at this point, or where do you spend your time?
Yeah, so it started back officially in 2019. I started investing in real estate in 2014, but on the multifamily side, didn't get started until 2019, and sold off several of those now. Right now we have I'm active on 3 projects that are really, really solid deals, and that's where I spend the majority of my time. So if I'm not underwriting opportunities, then I'm still kind of working through the asset management and adding value on that side of the business as well. But those are kind of the main areas that I spend my time right now. I think although this is a challenging environment that we're in, I think it's still time for some really good deals if you kind of have the right connections, know where to look, know how to evaluate a deal. And so that's what I do right now.
And I'll tell you, it is a challenging moment being 2023, getting some of these deals done. But to give you my 2 or 3 cents on it, because I mean, 2022, we closed over 220 multifamily projects, saw the insides and outs. Then all of a sudden, like January of 2023 rolls around and the financial markets froze. Couldn't get anything closed for a good few months. Then we see the little budding of light. And today, I mean, we're still closing probably little more than half of what we were doing in kind of the hot times of the last year. But we're really seeing, and anybody that's looking for multifamily or opportunities, the loan assumptions is where it's all at right now. And eventually that'll change and turn as kind of, well, hopefully the interest rates start coming down. But if you are on the hunt, definitely be looking for the loan assumption opportunities where you are getting in. Maybe you're paying a little premium on the purchase price, but you're getting that 4% loan instead of trying to get some 7 or 8% loan in today's markets.
I would have to agree 100%. And in fact, the deal that I think you kind of referenced earlier, that we closed on earlier this year, that's exactly what we did. It was a loan assumption. The developer that we bought the deal from, they bought a 40-year HUD loan, so low interest rate. It was lower than, it was under 3.5, and so we acquired it with 38 years remaining on there. So it just, and I've seen that strategy, like you mentioned. I mean, that's kind of really what people are starting to focus on. As long as the terms are right, seeking a loan assumption and getting that rate nice and low so that you can still have a healthy deal kind of going into the next year here.
I love it, and I really love the fact that you're taking all this experience that you've gained over the past decade, and now you're kind of doing that next step of, which is kind of part of my own passion, helping those budding entrepreneurs figure out how to get into the game, take the right steps, and make things happen. So I'm referring to, of course, kind of your capital training program, real high level. I do want to ask about the minutia, but share a little bit about what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So I launched a program recently. So I'll give you a quick backstory. So last year I launched a meetup. So I'm in the DC area, and when I was a petroleum engineer, I was in the Houston area. And so I noticed that being in Houston, there were a lot of meetups where people could get together, talk about strategies for multifamily syndication, whether it was a fund or whatever the JV, whatever it was. There were plenty of meetups where people were getting together, talking about strategies and partnering and taking action. My wife and I moved back to DC in 2020, and I noticed that there were not as many meetups, where people could get together and kind of talk about these things. So, I looked around, I said, well, I couldn't find one. So, you know what, I guess I'm going to have to start one. So that's what I did. And so, it was, purely free meetup where we would come out and I would kind of present, and I would have a guest come out and speak and share some information on how to execute and how to evaluate a deal, the whole nine. After each meetup, people would come up and say, listen, if you have anything kind of one-on-one, then I would love to, to have a conversation with you. And at the time, I just didn't have anything. And so But after so many times of people coming up and saying, hey, I need help, basically what they're saying is one-on-one, and I need some deeper, kind of a deeper dive. My wife looked at me and said, listen, you need to come up with something. And so that's what I did. And I decided to focus on one thing because I didn't want to make it too broad. There are a lot of programs that try and go after all phases of the syndication process, or even just the real estate investing process. And so I wanted to focus on one thing that I thought could make the biggest impact on an investor. And that is learning to attract capital, learning how to position yourself. First of all, to make sure you have the requisite knowledge, learning how to position yourself so that people in your network understand not only what you're doing, but they're excited about what you're doing. Understanding how to partner with people. I think you mentioned earlier, kind of that's a strategy that's effective. I like to call it partnering up. And so I crafted this program. It's called the Capital Mastery Coaching Program. And that's the aim of it. Is what we do is we teach clients, real estate investors, how to properly attract capital long before they have a deal. Because that's the mistake so many people make, is to get a deal and then they go out and start chasing capital. And it leads to burnout. It's a headache. There have been quite a few deals where they can't get to the starting line. Really, it's not the finish line, it's the starting line. So they can't get to the closing table. And
if you don't mind me just kind of hopping in there, and really I give you a lot of accolades for the time and area that you're focusing. There are a lot of investment education groups that are out there, but I'll tell you, almost exclusively all of them are, come on in, learn to be an investor by investing in other people's projects first, and then eventually you'll have some experience and you'll learn how to do it just by, you were a passive investor first and you saw what sold you, now sell other people. But there's not really a focus on and a honing of, it's a skill set on how to attract, the plan, the investors, the partners. And I don't think there's any other program in America that has really targeted that as, we're going to focus on creating the opportunity and creating the capital plan. So I do give you a lot of props on really focusing on what I see as being a huge need in the market.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's the thing, is that I saw it as kind of something that is missing. And you're right. There are countless programs where it's, hey, get in and we'll teach you kind of the mechanics, and you invest in other people's deals, and then hopefully by kind of either osmosis or by learning directly from the deals you're in, then you can eventually get to the active side. I haven't heard of any program that really focuses heavily on making sure that you position yourself, that you kind of understand what goes into it, even from the compliance side, like all of it that goes into, hey, how do you understand, what you need to know up front? How do you convey the message effectively and clearly? How do you craft your message? How do you establish who your target is, who you want to serve? And then sort of build this sort of network really around your mission, and hopefully people who are aligned with you, so that they're excited to partner whenever you have a deal come up. And I also tell people, listen,
I just want to key in real quick on exactly what you said right there, because it's what everybody misses. How to build excitement, build a community, and then you get the opportunity. That's the exact opposite of what 100% of everybody thinks. You get the opportunity, then you find the investors. And the answer is no. You find the investors, you get them excited, you get them to know, like, and trust you. You bring them in, and then you find the opportunity. And that I think is a huge secret that, sorry to interrupt you there. It's I really wanted to pinpoint that because nobody else is actually doing that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think because how often do you hear where people say, okay, now I've got a deal, so we got to get those, or I'm working on the deal, or something's coming up, and so I have to hurry and try and get these touches. I got to get my 2 or 3 touches out the way, which is really the wrong way to do it anyway, even from a compliance standpoint. But just in general, it's a poor way to build a connection. My goal is to help my clients build a community so that their message resonates with the people they're trying to help. And so there is this authenticity and this level of kind of, being real about what they're trying to do that, in my opinion, makes it much easier to do long before you have a deal. Because when you're under that pressure of the timeline and can I do it and all these things that are coming up and I need to be present in the deal, I believe it's too late. And so I think it's time to focus on those long before you have that. And you can also start to build relationships with the professionals that you would need in order to help you get it done, such as yourself, right? And so I think it's time to do that long before you have anything, so then everything else works more smoothly. To me, that's an important piece that is missing from the marketplace, and that's what we intend to bring and offer.
I don't know if you'd be willing to share a little bit of secret sauce, but let me tell you something that I tell a lot of my clients. We last year did well over 400 different investment projects. I talk to a lot of budding entrepreneurs, a lot of guys that are just getting into real estate, and their first thing is almost always I'm looking for a deal or I have this deal. And my response to them is, well, you need to be reaching out to your community, to your network, and letting the world know what you're doing now. Calling it testing the waters, telling them that, hey, I'm looking for these types of projects. If you have any leads, I would love to have them. If you're interested in partnering, these are what I'm looking for. You may not have it today, but it's like, planting those seeds so that when it all does come together, it can make it happen. And I don't really get too much deeper into it other than there's exactly what I tell a client. What would you expand on that, and what would you train on that to really nail that home?
So I'm going to say, I'll share two things that for me are ways to effectively do that. Okay. One is using social media in a way that is effective, because you can really speak directly to the person you want to reach or the people that you want to reach and serve through social media. And so one way to do that is really, really powerful is to get people to raise their hands, right? You can identify who in your network really wants your content, really wants to connect with you, stay connected with you, and to follow you on this journey. And so one way I do that is through calls to action. So I have several posts. I'm fairly active on social media, and so I'll make sure that every once in a while I give a lot. So that's one thing, is I give tons and tons of value to my network. And so, but I'll have a call to action post where it's, hey, if you want, an LP calculator, or if you want, various things downloadables that they can use that will give them a quick win. And so by giving and giving and giving, now you've established this community that says, okay, this is someone who's actually invested in kind of building up the knowledge base of the people who are following him. So that's one. The second thing that I do is that I think people don't do enough of is to really leverage webinars. I think that is one of the most effective ways to reach your people, control the message a little bit, control the space, and to give as much value as you can, but you also can clearly identify, who wants to receive this content, who kind of wants to be a part of this community that I'm building. And so those two things I think are really, really they're underutilized, I believe. And so I think it's something that going forward, that not in my program, that's what we do, but I think that it'll become increasingly important as we go forward.
So, but let me to dive in a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'm interested in getting into real estate. I've gone and I got some education. I can create some newsletters, and that is some powerful content, some benefit that you can bring to people. Now, to do a webinar, what am I talking about? How am I really getting people excited when I don't even have a deal to sell yet?
That's a great point. So one thing that I coach, I tell my clients is there are a couple of things that you're going to use the webinar for. One is almost as your business card, so to speak. The goal, I believe, is to educate your potential investors with as much information as they could use as possible to help them understand the investment, because this is an education-based investment. So it's to help them understand the investment, but also to help them understand how you work. And so that's what I share with them. Who's your team? What markets are you going after and why? How do you plan to execute the deal? How do you plan to mitigate risks? What types of, what's your strategy? Are you opportunistic? Are you value add? Are you core plus? By giving them all of that information, and if the people who take that in and they still are saying, okay, I need more, that's now your community, because they've heard everything about how you work. And so that also means that when it's time to hop on the phone calls are much more efficient. You're not starting from scratch. They already understand who you are. They understand what you're going to do, what the plan is. It's a conversation to maybe get to know them a little bit more, but they already fully understand, how I work. So for me, that's important for people to understand as well. Really dig into your approach, everything that an investor would need to know to understand and align with your goals and your strategy.
I love it. Well, we're kind of just scratching the surface, and I know you've set up kind of a 6-month program. I understand there's some classes, there's some one-on-one, there's some individualized coaching, there's some deep dives. Could you just kind of expand a little bit? Like 6 months is a ton of time. There's got to be a ton of education. What should be expected by anybody that decides to work with you?
Sure. So for me, the framework that we use and that we coach is a 5-pillar framework. Okay. So the first thing that I share with my clients is that you have to have an understanding of your capital fingerprint, is what I call it. So usually people will come, the real estate investors, they'll have somewhat of an understanding of the potential capacity of their current network and how much capital they might be interested in contributing if they have a deal at the right time, right market, these sorts of things. But it's also important to understand what the potential fingerprint is. So not only kind of friends and family, coworkers, friends, colleagues, this sort of thing, but the people that you have sort of approached and said, this is what I do, would you be interested? But there's also countless people that are in the network that they have not yet had those conversations with. So the first thing I say is, okay, make sure you understand exactly, or at least roughly, how strong your network is. And if someone has a deal today, then how much would you be able to, would your network be able to bring to that deal as a partnership? So getting clear on that, because I think people go, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken with and they've kind of had a deal coming up. And even though they had a deal that they were actively raising for now, they didn't really know how much they could contribute to the deal. So it's getting clear on that. The other one is understanding the language of capital, is what I call it, where it's, so if you think about it, being an engineer, in fact, my inclination used to be to go straight into the metrics. So if someone sits down and says, hey, Brandon, I like you, I like the team, tell me about the deal. First thing I would do is say, well, here's your IRR, here's your utilized cash on cash, here's a DSCR, and so all those things, you lose someone if you dig deep into the metrics instead of saying.
I got to tell you, I just grade over just with that. No, it's about the story.
It's about the story, and so the understanding the language of money, understanding how to speak in a way that resonates with an investor. You just say, hey, listen, our goal is to double our investors' capital within 3 to 5 years, a typical our holding period. And that's how we typically will target deals and structure deals such that that's the outcome. That's the intended outcome. But there are ways to have the conversation to make it very clear without getting into the being overly specific. The other thing is understanding investor psychology. And what that means is how do you connect with someone and how do you make it clear to them that you care about the things they care about? Because, this is saying that, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so I believe that is actually one of the secret sauce or one of the really key points that someone needs to raise to hone in on if they are going to attract capital. You have to be able to connect with your people. You have to know what they care about, and you have to make it clear that your product, your service can help them get what they want out of it. Because in the end,
let me give the secret to anybody watching. It's 3 things. What's the return? What's the risk? And why are you the right guy to make it all happen?
Yep. That's it right there.
I don't know if there's much more to it other than just the know, like, and trust.
Yep.
But those seem to be the big 3.
That's right. That's right. The know, like, and trust factor has to be there, and it's not just something a phrase that we throw around. And so the last 2 things that I focus on, one is So I like to challenge people who, when we have a conversation, to say, okay, so you're looking to raise some capital for a deal. What happens if someone says yes now? So you have the conversation and they love what they're hearing. They say, okay, you know what? I want to put 200 in the deal. Then what? And so usually their face just kind of freezes and says, well, I don't know. So you have to have the mechanism to onboard that capital, because they're not just going to wire the funds to you directly to your bank account. So it's having the mechanism set up, and then also kind of going beyond. So once, for my clients, once they go through the program and we kind of dig in deep to make sure that they fully well-rounded, they now have their community built. I like to focus on connections, calls, and soft commits. So when they exit the program, then it's about nurturing their community beyond that. Okay, so that's kind of the 5 pillars that we focus on, and to make sure that our clients kind of fully understand and that they have fully ingrained by the time they graduate.
I absolutely love it. And you know what? I love that. I mean, we hadn't talked about this before. You really nailed kind of those key points of, I have a dream to get these business done, get this real estate closed, but what it really takes, like you've nailed it. And like I said, like nobody else is teaching, here's the process and how to do it. Before, it's just like, hey, join my group, invest in my deals, and eventually you'll learn how.
Yeah.
So I just absolutely love it and look forward to going right along and learning more, as I'm sure everybody else listening sure is looking forward to it as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any final thoughts, or would you like to share, if anybody's interested, how do we get a hold of you?
So I have a discovery call link, but I think one of the fastest ways, I'm active on LinkedIn. So it's Brandon Jenkins, a very common name, but I'm active on LinkedIn. I'll give you my email address. It's brandon.jenkins, BRANDON.JENKINS @Birch Prosper. So that's at BIRCHPROSPER.com. Shoot me a note, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll have the conversation. And we can maybe include our discovery call. I'm not sure link here, but we can work it out.
We'll add the link down below so they can reach you directly as well.
All right, that sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Brandon. I kind of got into the weeds with how to start even thinking about raising capital. So really appreciate you joining today.
And Nate, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Hey, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today, deep diving into just the budding entrepreneur of how to start even thinking about raising capital, building a community, making it all happen. So really appreciate you joining today. And until next time, and this is why.